All right.
All right. So welcome, everybody. For those who don't know, my name is Jake. I go by Rake Trades. And today, what I want to be doing is interviewing, having a discussion. One of my buddies, one of my good friends, a former student, and now a team member of mine, Mr. Ron Gilman. What's going on, bro?
How's it going?
Not bad, man. Not bad. Just a little Sunday action, relaxing, taking it easy. How was your weekend?
Not bad. I worked a little bit in our family's trailers, but besides that, just been hanging out.
Nice, nice. A little relaxation from the stressful week in the market.
Well, in the last 2 days, also my buddy had an engagement party, so last night turned into a little bit of a bender on accident.
A little bender getting into one, right? You never fully predict when they come. They just happen out of nowhere. And when you do, you just dive in head first.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I'm bored. Next thing you know, you're in a full-fledged bender, and you're like, oh, I don't know how I got here.
Next thing you know, you wake up the next morning like, why? I didn't want to be hungover today. Like, what? This is not what I had planned.
Yeah, exactly. It never ends well.
Never ends well. It's never what we had planned. Awesome, man. Well, I'm glad to be having you on here. I'm glad to be having a good discussion with you. It's just interesting. One of the guys that I've been working with, he tasked me. He put me. He said, "Hey, do you have a top student or somebody that you worked with in the first mentorship that you would want to have an interview? Right? Is there somebody that you think is as rise up the ranks, something like that?" And instantly, as soon as you said that, I was like, oh, I mean, that's Ron, right? So for those who don't know, I hosted a mentorship group in the beginning of January, and we had our first ever class, first time I've ever hosted anything like that. We had a bunch of different students, and Ron and I had actually worked together before that, and we'll get into where we met and all that. But Ron was one of the students in the mentorship group, and he was one of the more advanced students. I'll be the first to say it, right? He was one of the more traders that had his, I mean, you were leaps and bounds ahead of some of the other people in there, right? There's some people who were brand new and all that. Some people were just getting into it, and you had been doing this for a little bit. And for you, it was more, at least from my knowledge, it was more, honing your craft, right? It was more putting the final touches on everything. And then within a month after the mentorship, after having seen everything that Ron was posting in the room and all that, I was like, I snatched. I was like, I need you on my team. I want you I want you in a staff role, right? I want you. And so he's the first mentorship student that has progressed from a student to now a team member, right? He's now part of my staff, part of part of our team as a collective, as a group. And we're super lucky to have him, right? So, Ron, you were instantly the person that came to mind when we had this discussion, right? About who I would want to do an interview with. So, with that, let's go ahead and dive right in and just start talking questions, right? Start talking trading about what got you into this, how we all got started. So tell me a little bit more just about you. For people who don't know, tell me a little bit more about how old are you? Where are you from? When did you get into trading? All the basics.
So I'm 24 and I'm actually from Northeast Ohio, which it's weird. Like in the group, like most of the group seems like they're from like West Coast, Cali.
Yeah.
But there's like a few of us right around the East Coast.
Yeah, yeah. A few specifically from Ohio. There's like a few specifically from Ohio, in the same general area, right? Which I wouldn't have expected.
There's two people I live within like an hour and a half of, which is weird.
Yeah, crazy.
Small world.
Yeah. So how long ago did you get into trading? You've been doing this now for a little over a year, right? Like 12 or 14, 15 months now?
Right around there, yeah.
Right around there? Nice, okay.
Yeah, it was January 29th of last year.
Okay, just a few days after my birthday. Wow, that's a lucky start.
Yeah.
So what got you into it as a whole? Was it an Instagram ad? Did you see things online? What got you into trading as a whole?
So in the beginning, getting into it, it started out literally just Instagram ads.
Right.
I saw an account, like I'm like, oh, this looks interesting. And deep down, I've always been like a numbers guy. It's what I do. It's what I've always been good at in school, was math and all that. And so it seemed like something I might get interested in, but it was also the concept of, oh, that looks pretty easy.
Right. Yeah. Because that's how it's portrayed online. I mean, that's exactly way I first got into it, right? When I very first started, It was an Instagram ad. It was somebody posting a Robinhood screenshot that was like, I'm up $250 today or something. You can do this too. And I was like, what do you mean I can make $250 with my phone? I was like, what do you mean this is an option, right? So that was crazy that the Instagram ads are what really like push people into it, right? And that's where like a lot of this initial growth comes from, is just from Instagram. That's all where it pushes through.
Yeah, it gets it started, and then like you start to follow the people, and you start to like actually like learn more about them and like see them post more and more and more, and it just slowly sucks you in little by little.
Right.
And then you see a discount or something like that, and you're like, oh, let's try it.
Let's try it out. Exactly. So when you first got started, how did it go? What was the beginning patches of, like, I think I know the answer to this, but just for to make people feel better out there, how did the beginning stages of your trading career go?
So I literally followed the trader cycle to a T. I started out the first 2 weeks making more than I've like ever made. I'm like, this is great. This is wonderful. And then earnings seasons hit for
Yep.
big tech. And I didn't know anything about sizing, like at all. And the next about 6 months were pretty rough.
Yep. That seems to be how it goes, right? And I imagine there are a bunch of people watching this now. It's like, yeah, that sounds damn similar, right? Because the first, I don't know what it is, but why, and some people might not feel this way, but I don't know what it is, but it feels like beginning traders, you're always going to win in the beginning. Like, I don't know what it is, but you always, it's almost like you're too dumb to lose in the beginning. Like you don't know what you're doing. And so it somehow it works out, right? The first couple of trades you take, somehow they always work out. You always see the profits before you end up giving them all back and before you end up going through all that beginning cycle.
Yeah, it makes no sense. Like almost everybody starts out doing pretty well when in theory they shouldn't do well at all.
No, not at all, right?
And then when they finally start to realize what they're doing, that's when everything goes downhill and it makes no sense.
Right? It makes no sense. It's something, I think it's that like, it's some sort of concept or idea that like you must be like, I think that's what it is we're too dumb in the beginning. We don't know what we're doing to the point where like, we're going to hold through a pullback that we're down on. Whereas like, if you know what you're doing, you start watching P&L, you get scared, you sell in that first pullback, where in the beginning, you're just like, oh, this will go back up. Who cares? Right. It'll go back up. It's, you don't really have that sort of knowledge. So that's why it's funny. Just brings me a little side tangent. 2020 in the very beginning, which I know is after you started, but during 2020, it was insane because I said this to a lot of people. You made a lot more money in 2020 if you were stupid as opposed to if you were smart, right? And that means that like for me, for example, in 2020 was with COVID and with all the craziness, I was a few years into trading and I was trying to be responsible and disciplined and smart and trade with small size and all that. And I did. I think I built some good habits in there, but at the same time, anybody who just bought out of the money call options on tech stocks in 2020 and just held and went all in, they made so much money, right? And it's like that beginner's luck and that beginner's curse, I think. Problem is none of those people kept any of the profits that they made, right? They made it all in 2020. And then as soon as 2021 hit, there was a few rough weeks and everybody just lost it all, right? Everything that everybody had made from 2020 was just gone.
Yeah, see, I kind of started similar because I started doing like regular shares in 2020 because I saw like everyone's like, oh, this is when you want to buy this and that. So like I had a bunch of low cost shares and I'm like, oh, this is great. Like I'm making great money. I like doubled an account in a year off shares. Like, I'm a genius trader. And then I got into options and I'm like, no.
No. That market decides to slap us real quick 1 or 2 times just to humble us, make sure we know, oh no, options and shares, not the same thing.
Yeah. I'm like, you can't lose money. Then you get in and you lose more money than you could think.
Then you have your very first weekly option expire worthless. And it's like, wait, what?
You mean the
$2,000 that I spent on this is just gone. It's what you mean? Oh man, never fun. But so a rocky start. It's safe to say a rocky start in the beginning, right? It wasn't the smoothest of transitions for you. You weren't one of the very few people in the world who come in and immediately pick it up. I don't know if I personally know anyone who was one of those few people, but safe to say it was a bit of a rocky start. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So what for you shifted? Like, because I know you had started even before we did the mentorship. I know the mentorship took you to like, to my knowledge, helped take you to another level. But what was it that like in your mindset that shifted when after you had gone through that little losing stage, like, okay, this isn't how I'm going to do it. What sort of flipped that switch? And then what did you do about it to try and take it to the next level, right? What were the things that really, just from what you did, right? What was like inside your decision-making process on that a little bit?
So the main thing I was doing was I was making myself take about 2 hours every single night to study, like start to analyze, actually understand like options and all of that. Like I would watch a bunch of YouTube videos. I did like all of TD Ameritrade's, like
the free courses,
stuff like that, just to get like the basics. And then I would spend, I know you know this, I spent like as much as my free time as I could in front of a chart.
Yeah.
Like even if it was like nothing was going on, I would be like running through charts just to see what I knew.
No, and I can attest to that because I remember getting a ton of DMs from you and one of the previous groups that we worked with that was like, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And I remember because when you and I first started working together, I wasn't working with many other people. So we were back and forth. And then I started to work with more people. I was like, oh my God, I just have too many DMs, but I was still just charts nonstop and you were scanning. And that was the thing to me. That's how I knew you were going to be successful at this one day. It was just a matter of time, right? Is because as soon as you started to flip that sort of switch and like really start to put in the hours that you were talking about, it was visible, right? You could see that things were starting to click more. You could see that. I think that at least from what I see, a lot of people who struggle as traders, they never diagnose the issues which a lot of them come back to psychology. We always talk about that. But the other one is that I think it comes a lot back to just chart understanding, right? Like a lot of people, they get fixated on certain indicators or fixated on buying dips here or something like this, that they never fully truly process what is happening on the chart. What's the trend? Are we in an uptrend? Are we in a downtrend? Are we above the open? Are we below the open? Are we trading at support? Are we in a daily uptrend? Are we in a daily downtrend? It becomes a lot more. That's, I think, like the problem with some of the strategies that people approach, is that they never fully diagnose what the chart is telling them. And that's something that you instantly said. That was the first thing that you mentioned, was you started to go hours and you were starting to understand what was happening in the charts, not just what was happening in terms of what could you see afterwards, but what was happening that you could see in real time that would sort of tell the story of what the charts were saying, right? And I think that, for me at least, is something that I think that some people, they'll go their whole trading careers without ever actually understanding a good way to tell the chart story. And I wish that wasn't the case, you know?
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
No, please go ahead.
I was gonna say, the one thing that also helped me is, as I started to dive more into chart time, was when I did my first one-on-one with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember, because most people don't know, I did 2 one-on-ones with you before I even got in the mentorship.
Right.
And one thing that really got to me was the indicators, because I still remember from the first lesson we had.
Yep.
We were talking about it, like what I do trading, all this, and the main thing that it made me realize is indicators never really got me into a trade. They just always gave me reasons to keep them open.
Right.
Whether they were losing or like slightly up, they always just made me keep the trades open.
Right. It's like, oh, it could just be pulling back to the 200 MA on the 15-minute. And it's like, wait, you all of a sudden you start making up reasons why you should hold in a certain sense, right? Like, oh, we're just pulling back to VWAP, right? Or we're just pulling back to the 20 MA. It's like, well, that doesn't mean it has to hold, right? Like, you're giving all these justifications sometimes. I like the way you phrase that, is that the indicators sometimes, they make it feel like you're justifying staying in a trade when you shouldn't necessarily be staying in that trade, right? It's not really giving you one. And I'll be the first to say, I've had a hard no indicators approach in the past, and the more and more that I continue to grow and develop as a trader, I want to sort of, it's not that, like, especially, and I know you know this because you use VWAP still, if I'm correct, right? You still use VWAP, right? I'm not against indicators at all, especially the 20 EMA and VWAP. I think those two, if you use those the right way, they can be really, really powerful. But I think that those, even all of those, it all comes together with some sort of understanding of trends and price action, right? I think that if people don't have an understanding of what's the uptrend, what's the downtrend on different timeframes and how to use those together, then all the indicators will never really tell you the whole story, right? They'll never really capture everything that you're trying to gauge when you're looking at that chart, right?
Yeah.
So that's always just been something for me that just sort of stood out as, and it's just interesting that you mentioned that. Sorry, sometimes, you know me, I go on tangents sometimes. My brain just rants. But all right, so you got into trading. You struggled a little bit. You went through the typical trader cycle, as we all do. You ended up doing some one-on-ones, and then I know you, above all else, you put the work in, right? Because I saw you diving into charts. I saw you studying and learning, and I saw you really trying to take your own trading to the next level, and it was visible, right? So once you actually started to understand more of the strategies, right? And maybe even post mentorship now, right? After you got that little fine tuning as well, what would you say are the biggest things from a strategic standpoint that like give you an edge, right? What are some of the, so we could even drill that down into like, what's one of your favorite setups, right? Without diving into a chart, without getting too crazy, what are some of the things that strategically that you like to execute on, right? Like, what are the things that you like to look for in trades?
So one of my favorite things that I've actually noticed looking at that like trade tracker that we're a part of. Yep. And one thing I noticed is Monday and Tuesday are typically my best days.
Interesting. Okay.
And I think that's because those days I base almost everything off the weekly candles and the weekly setups. And then I dive down into the daily and see how that looks.
I like that. Yep.
It gives you more of a sense of like the overall market. You're not just looking at one daily candle that just happened and playing off that, which tends to trap, like in my mind, it'll trap me on like a Thursday or Friday.
Yeah.
Like this week, you would have been absolutely mutilated if you
pay attention to the dailies early in the week. They were looking really bullish before two slam downs, right? But the weekly was still in a sell the whole time.
Yeah, like that right there would have been like all right, full port, we're ready to long everything.
Right.
It's like there's the higher low we're in.
Right.
And then
Exactly.
if you look at the weekly, we're still in a downtrend.
Right.
I
Right.
mean, some indices haven't even made a higher low. So
Right. So there's
there's
no reason to be putting on that kind of risk, right? So it's interesting
yeah.
that you say that, because for me as well, that was sort of in the beginning of my career. It was in a different way, but in the same way that you mentioned, for me, I was always so locked in on 5-minute charts. And I was even so zoomed in on like the current candles. I thought that I could be so good at reading what was happening in the current 5-minute candle that I could predict what was happening next, or whatever the case may be. But then I would be so zoomed in, and then I'd look back on the 15-minute and be like, dude, this is such a clear downtrend. Why are you trying to buy dips on this 5-minute and call reversals or call bottoms, right? And it all came back just zoom out, right? When in doubt, zoom out. And that was a huge, huge thing for me. So it's interesting. That's something similar for you as well. So what about like a favorite day trade setup? Are you a short or do you prefer to short? I think I know you like the bull side, but there's part of me that tells me that you're a little bit of a bear at heart, and that you like trading the shorts more than longs.
See, I don't know, because but the problem is like all this year, ever since like the beginning of the year, I've had like a short outlook, and
Right.
I always post like weekly charts in the chat and stuff, and it's because like I don't know why, but there's something like that just clicks for shorts. That's a lot
Right.
easier.
Right.
Mainly probably just because last year all I knew was longs. There was never a
Right.
short opportunity, and if I shorted it was for an hour, and then it was it.
Right.
But now you can actually hold in this market. But I don't know. The beginning of the year, my best trades were shorts off of when most people thought we were still longing. I, for some reason, was leaning more bearish off the weekly, and it paid out very well for me.
Nice.
Just on those.
But no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was gonna say I'm not sure like why, but most of the time my favorite setup ideally is similar to yours, where it's the gap and retest.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
the opening level strategy is like probably one of my most used strategies.
Right. Awesome. Hell yeah. Same here. And those are some of my favorites. I love the gaps over retest. So for those who don't know, that's simply, we'll talk about this more in depth and such later, but it's a gap over a specific level. And then it gives you some sort of, or a gap under for a short, it gives you some sort of retest at a level that we're watching that gives you a reference point, right? And it's easy. Then the main reason I love those trades is it's easy to determine your stop, right? You can use some sort of candle action around the level, but really it's that level as your stop, right? And it gives you really great risk reward on those types of trades, because oftentimes it's kind of thing where you're risking 50 cents to make $6 or something like that, right? You get really good entries on some of these moves. I thought it was interesting. One other thing you said, just about preferring shorts because you were mainly in longs all of last year. I thought it's interesting because whenever I catch a good short, like we caught a nice one on Friday, right? Whenever I catch a good short like that, and I ended up riding it for a good chunk of the move. It does make me think back to my early trading career, where I spent so many times in a bad long position, watching it go down, watching what was happening. And like something was just in like a 5-minute downtrend, right? For example, and I'd be buying every hammer at the low of the day, even though we're still in a downtrend, it's just going to rally into a lower high and keep going down. But I would be watching and staring at that sort of price action, that when I started to short and I was like, oh, I know how this is going to go because I've been on the other side of this before. I've been the one buying dips in this downtrend and trying to fight it. So hold on, maybe let me hold this because I think we're going to keep going down. So no, it's interesting. Moral of the story, if you've been in enough bad longs, you know what a good short looks like, right? If you've been in enough bad longs, you know what a good short looks like.
And that's one of the main things too, because I know you said it during the mentorship, is that was one of your weakest areas was actually getting in failure setups.
Yep.
Which to me, that has been like key this entire year.
100%.
I've never seen more fake outs in my life.
Dude, never. That's the thing with like people think that these markets are easy to trade because like, oh, it's a downtrend to shut down. It's like, no, downtrends, they do not make it easy. Uptrends, they honestly make it very straightforward. There's not a whole lot of fake outs. Downtrends, it's fake outs left and right. You're getting failures here, failure gaps, all these types of things. So yeah, and that's still an area I'm honestly trying to improve on, right? Because we were watching Tesla for a nice short on the earnings day on Thursday, or we were watching them in both directions. And once we failed, I think it was the 1073, like 67 level or something like that. There was like a 75-point move down. And if we had been at least for me, if I had been a little bit more aggressive in shorting that at the failure of that level, that would have been a huge trade, right? A potential 2, 3, 4,000, or I think contracts might have gone 2,000 or 3,000% from that top to bottom, right? And we had the levels mapped out on that. So that's something that I'm personally still trying to work on, as we go, is be more accepting of, hey, these failure setups that we see, especially to the downside. I love failure to go lowers. I need to work on trading failure to go higher is better, right? And continuing to sort of grow my game at that. So just interesting, no matter what stage you're at, whether you've done this for 4 years, a year and a half, 2 years, 6 months, you're always going to have stuff to grow on, no matter what. All right. So I got a few more questions for you here, bro. Let me ask you, I got one of these lined up. So out of curiosity, what are some of the main reasons? Let's take a step back from the strategy aspect of it, but everybody gets into trading for different reasons, right? Everybody has different goals out of it that they're hoping to do. Without, trying to sound too cliche, because everyone, as soon as you talk about the perks of trading, I feel like it starts to feel like furu-y or guru-y. That's like, it's like, oh, financial freedom, all that. But the reality is that's the opportunity that provides for a lot of us, right? So I'm curious, what's your why, right? What are the reasons you got into trading? What's the why for you of why you want to pursue this ultimately extremely difficult career, right? It's not easy. It's been brutal to start. So what's your why?
So obviously everybody wants financial freedom. That's what everyone wants in life, no matter what career you're in. So this one, you just have more of an opportunity at times. But my main thing was, my goal in the end is to do this to be able to help my parents retire early. Is my mom was a single mom my entire, half my life, until she met my stepdad, and she raised me and my brother by herself. So it's just my way of being able to give back once I finally get to that point,
right,
for everything she's done. So I can kind of just help her out as well.
Right. Hell yeah, dude. I didn't know that. That's awesome. That's really, dude, that's awesome. So I didn't know that. I knew that you were always looking out for your family, but I didn't know that specifically about your mom. So if that's your why, then what is what are some of your goals that you see for yourself, right? And I know we never try and put a dollar value on it. So not even from a dollar value perspective, but just from a trading perspective, what are some of your goals over the next 3 years, right? Because you're what we say, 15 months into it, 16 months into it, something like that, 16 months into it. What's the goal by year 3, right? What's the goal by year 3? Is the goal to be full-time? Where's your head at on that?
I mean, by year 3, obviously I'd love to be full-time.
Right.
And then I'd like to obviously be up trading in the moderator staff position, work my way up that ladder.
Yeah.
And then eventually the end goal, it would be to be in the same conversation as you, Umar, Rippy, all of them.
Sir. Yes, sir. So my man's aiming big, and that's what I love, dude. That's what I love. That's what I love, because I'm still trying to get up there with all those, with everybody as well. But dude, I have no doubts that's what you're. Speaking of which, check in the description section, everybody. Ron is making a trading Instagram, and we'll have a link to it in there. So you need to make sure that you're following both of us on Instagram, right? But if you're already following me, make sure you're following Ron. So we'll put his new trading Instagram in the description. Do you have a name for it yet, or is that TBD?
It's TBD. I'll have it by the end of the night. I might just make it, and then once I come up with a catchier one or something that, I'll switch it up.
You can always change it. The good news is until you get the blue, I think that's what I've heard, is that once you get a blue check, which I'm still hoping to do that in some point in my life. Once you get the blue check, you can't change your name, but until then you can change it, and it doesn't really do anything. So we'll make sure to get you linked up on the bottom here, but make sure that you are definitely following Ron there, because my man's going places. So
and then one thing I wanted to point out real quick is when you said my man's aiming big. Yeah. One of my favorite all-time quotes, I forget who said it, but I have it written in my room and on my trading sheet, is, how big would you dream if you knew you couldn't fail?
I like that. How big would you dream if you knew you couldn't fail? Right.
So if you're okay with the failures, which in trading you have to be.
Oh yeah.
How big would you dream?
Right.
So
I like that. Right. And let me just say, I know it's big dreams. I have zero doubt in my mind that you'll get there, bro. Literally zero doubt. I have zero doubt. From the day that we started working together, I knew that you had the right mindset for it. That for me is it's almost, and now, especially now that you're part of, the part of the team, you'll start to notice this more and more as well. I think is that you can, at least for me, a lot of times early on in conversations with people, you can tell which ones, I think, at least you can never tell who's going to be successful right off the bat, but almost you can, because you can tell just the way that people talk, the way they phrase things, the way they ask questions, the way they what their general approach is, what their goals are for it, you can kind of tell, you know, you can pick up on, okay, this person has the right mindset. They're just going through a rough patch. They're going to make it, versus this person's a gambler. They're going to keep making these same mistakes. At some point, unless they change these mistakes, they're going to go down this rabbit hole, right, for a while, right? And with you, it's kind of instantly, for me, I could tell, like, all right, he went through a rough patch, but he knows the steps he needs to take to get there, and he's actually taking those steps, right?
Yeah.
It's just interesting to me that we all know the steps, right? We all know the steps that we need to take in order to get to that finish line. It's just, how disciplined are you? And are you actually going to follow through and try and do it, right? Are you actually going to put your money where your mouth is and put the work in, right? And I think that's you can tell pretty quickly with people, you know, whether somebody is really there to put the work in, or whether they're there hoping to make a quick buck overnight, right? Which is, if you want to make a quick buck overnight trading options, my advice is, if you ever do make a quick buck overnight, never risk it again, because you'll lose the next one.
Yeah. Stop trading options as soon as you do it.
As soon as you win and take it away, right?
As soon as you feel like you need to size up off that winner's high, like the beginner's run, then you need to just call it right there.
Call it right then and there, because this is not passive income. This is not easy income, right? This is a difficult thing that we're trying to really learn, right? We're always learning on it. We're always working on it. Okay, so a few more questions I have for you. The first one, I do want to talk about the mentorship a little bit, right? The point of this interview isn't to try and go too in depth on it, but I do want to talk about just one thing, which is, like, what would be the one thing as part of the mentorship that really helped you take your trading sort of to the next level, right? Was it a strategy? Was it a mental approach? What was the one thing that, like, stuck with you above all else? If there is one thing, right? If there's something that sort of stuck with your brain more than anything else.
I mean, the main thing that stuck, I know for sure, was the levels. And then, like, I would say it's more like the strategy mixed with, like, psychology, because you really get into, like, the details of it all. Like, you may miss one or two things, like, personally, but those one or two things could be it. That could be all you need to finish it.
Right.
Like, as I went, the more and more I notice is it's not like big mistakes that I'll be making. Mm-hmm. It'll be just something super tiny. And once I finally realize that, then there'll be another one that I notice, and I got to start working on that one.
Right.
And that's also one way I think that I have seen a lot more improvement is a lot of people love to, like, focus on the greats and, like, what you do right and all this and that. I think the fastest way to grow in this is to focus on what you're doing wrong.
100%. I couldn't agree more on that.
Because if you spend the time to focus on what you're doing wrong, then you're not going to keep doing that wrong. But if you focus on what you're doing right, you're never going to know why you're making mistakes.
Yep. It's sort of that self-awareness to be able to identify, okay, here are the flaws. Here's the mistakes that I've been making, right? What am I going to do to fix it, right? What am I going to do to fix it? As opposed to, I think that's where the human psychology part of it comes in, because as humans, we hate losing and we hate being wrong. We love winning. We love being right. So that's what we focus on, right? We focus on the winning and the being right, as opposed to identifying, dude, you made these mistakes, right? Like this is the area you need to correct, right? Anybody can make small, consistent profits in, day trading. Problem is, are you able to hold on to those profits? Are you able to avoid the big blow up tilt days where you give back where you're wrong and you refuse to admit you're wrong? So it's interesting. Yeah, I think that was a great answer, right? And I think that's something that we tried to go really in depth in the classes and everything, is try and focus on. So awesome. Yeah, I like that. I think that was a good answer. And then the levels, dude, from the first time I ever saw those levels in action, literally I was like, okay, wait, this is something else. This is something else. So I will give shout out to Eric from Major League Trading. I first learned them from, gave a little bit of my own twist on how I use and interpret them. But they are crazy. They are crazy. My only problem with them ever is that sometimes I don't pay enough attention to, like, how one is reacting at one. Like I'll be like, oh, we're not failing the level. And it's like, wait, we really are failing the level. And that's a nice short. You need to get out of longs and flip short, right? It's like that level is really, dude, it's like that level's holding, right? Like, so it's interesting. Yeah. But I can agree. Those are the two areas that I think that I've tried to put the most focus on. So I'm glad to hear that those were, the couple areas that stood out.
Yeah, and there's also the plus side about the levels is, because obviously I do leverage crypto as well.
Right.
There's not many people doing that. It works phenomenally on leverage crypto, like to a T most of the time. It's scary.
Yep. Somebody that we both knew in the past, Dane, he always used, it was interesting because he never learned this level strategy, but him and
Yeah.
I talked one day and he used a very similar one called order blocks or something like that. And it was just very interesting to me. And I was like, damn, no wonder, because he's a full-time crypto. He's big on crypto. And I was like, yeah, no wonder both of our strategies work so well in the same markets, right? So yeah, dude, the leverage crypto, and I know you've been crushing it with that account. You started it with how much?
$140.
And where's it at now?
Just under 2,000.
Dude, which is like crazy,
yeah.
right? And
it was in like, I'm insane, like impressed just with myself with how steady it's grown. But
yeah, and dude, that's the thing is with crypto, you have to like these, even though that percentage is absolutely insane, the dollar value is insane, you have to keep trading small and discipline on it, because one bad trade could knock you out, right?
One forgotten stop loss and everything's gone.
Right. But dude, you've been crushing it with that account and people have been following along. I know there's I forget what the name is, but I think she's from Singapore and she's been following along with those trades. Somebody in the chat who's been following, maybe Buy the Dip or somebody in the chat I know has been following along and actually making money with them.
Yeah, I think it's like red, blue, opaque.
That's maybe? That's what it is.
Yeah.
I think he or she is from Singapore. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay.
But I know because they don't have to use VPN for crypto, those rats.
That'd be nice.
Right? All right. So out of curiosity, and this might be a crypto trade, but what would you say is your most memorable trade ever? And not necessarily the best. I mean, it might be the dollar value one that sticks with you the best, but more so it might be a trade that you executed super well, right? Or you might have a bad one you executed super poorly, right? But I'm guessing the poor one might be an earnings gamble, and we don't need to talk about that, right?
Yeah, most likely.
Most likely. But what about the most memorable trade from man, I came in, I was watching this, I executed it to a T, I held runners. Do you have a trade that really stands out in your brain?
That trade for me was that short in the first 2 weeks of the year when everyone else was leaning pretty long. And I remember I was preaching short. And I was throwing charts everywhere. And then I think I tripled my account that I had in the beginning of the year just in those 3 weeks with shorts.
Crazy, right? Because especially when shorts get moving, you don't need to have huge size on to double an account because the IV gets pumping. Contracts go up like crazy, and especially in those early days of that drop. Because I remember that very, very well. That was right before the mentorship started, right before everybody came into the Discord, right as it was happening, right? Yeah. And even I was probably leaning long because I know me, I'm a long bias trader. And I remember you catching that short, rubbing it in a little bit as you do, sir, as you should, not to me, but to the world, because nobody was looking short. And that one so that was it the execution that really you stuck to your game plan, you followed your analysis, right? And that I think is probably what was the most rewarding part, right? Is that above all else, you trusted yourself, you trusted your plan, and the plan played out.
Yeah, that was where I really started to realize very this is really starting to click when I went counter most of the traders in the market, and it paid off very well. So.
Right. And that might be a little bit of a clue that when all the traders in the market are leaning one way, we should keep a contrarian eye.
I have noticed that quite a bit.
We should keep a contrarian eye, because when everybody's thinking one thing, the market is the ultimate king and queen of the Uno reverse, where it happens to pull the switch at the last minute and flip on us, right? So crazy. I mean, I remember that move. That was an awesome short. That whole few period of weeks where we got, because that was really the first leg down in the market. That was the first time where we tried to hold the pullback, tried to hold a daily pullback and a higher low, and that we didn't. And it's crazy. As soon as we flipped and failed that higher low, boom, waterfall, right?
Yeah, I think when I posted it was that weekly higher low, as it was setting, I was posting this could be the beginning of it. Right. And it actually was.
Right. Literally, it ended up being that. Damn. Crazy, bro. That was a great move.
Yeah, and then besides that, the other one that's most memorable to me would be following you last November.
Oh yeah, dude. November.
So I remember I messaged you about that. That was
dude.
I took Tesla.
I tripled accounts trading small size, on longs, just Tesla all day, every day. Oh, gorgeous time. I can't wait to get that back. I just had go ahead.
I was gonna say I remember it was that one Tesla trade where I think it went a couple 100% in a day.
Yeah.
That trade, I remember you said it and you're like, oh, you're risking like 150 a contract or something like that. And I'm like, I can risk that.
Yeah.
Well, I waited like a couple more minutes. Next thing you know, I'm only risking 75 a contract. And I'm like, oh, I'll do that any day.
Yeah.
So I like doubled what I would normally put in
yeah.
like to just match my normal risk, and
Yeah.
it was unreal.
Dude, I think that was the Tesla trade. I think that was the very first time I made an Instagram video. The very first time I made a talking head video where I was like, Tesla going to 1,000? I think so. And the next week it gapped up to 1,000. I was just like, holy crap, like this, I could do this on like the Instagram thing. This could, the talking head could work, you know?
Yeah.
Crazy, dude. That was fun times. I'm hoping we get that sort of pleasant action back at least sometime this year, maybe, who knows?
Yeah.
It's going to take these charts some work to get back and looking good for them, but we'll see. Man, though, those are some good memories though, both on the short this year and the early of the year. Because man, you got to give yourself some credit on that, because especially not only is it hard to go counter what everybody else is thinking, but at the time you were in a couple of different groups, and to not only hear from like the leaders of those groups, which I'm sure I was leaning long. I wasn't against the bearish thesis, but I'm a long biased trader, so I was probably trying calls. But and then from other groups and their leaders, and then also just the members in the group, it can be hard to sort of detach yourself from the noise and be like, I want to follow my own plan, right? And that's what you did. And so, dude, props to you, because that was a fire trade, man. So really,
I appreciate it.
Yeah, dude. So, okay, there's a few more questions, then we'll wrap up. Let's get back to our Sunday. This has been a ton of fun though so far. So thank you again for hopping on.
I enjoyed it.
It's been great. If you had any advice for people who are brand new, what would you say to them, right? For somebody who's, I'm going to ask you to give advice to a few different people. First, if they're brand new, they've never done anything trading related before, what would your advice for them be?
If you're brand new and you've never traded before, I would say take probably a month or two and just study.
Yeah. Agreed.
I mean,
completely agree.
Study, like start to figure out everything that you know. Mm-hmm. And then, yeah, it sucks seeing everyone make money, but you need to paper trade.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Just that way you can at least get the strategy down. Mm-hmm. And then in that time, you can also build up some money that you may be okay willing to risk.
Right.
And throw that into a small account, and do not enter names like Tesla, Shop, Amazon. There's no need to enter those.
Zero, no ifs, ands, or buts about it. No Shop, no Tesla, no Amazon with smaller accounts. No exceptions. No exceptions. Yeah. No exceptions.
Shop's still on my no list. Yeah. I will not trade Shop.
Dude, it's going to be on my no list too, because that thing is just brutal, man. Okay, so if that's your advice, and I completely agree. If you're brand new, the first thing that you need to be doing is books and YouTube videos. The free YouTube University when it comes to trading is solid. You can get some good basic information out of there. And some of the basic books, first one I'd recommend, and I'll include a link to it below as well, is the Charting and Technical Analysis by Fred McCallan. The reason I'd recommend that one is because I read that in like 2 hours on an airplane, and it's just very straightforward. So definitely agree with you. Completely brand new. Start with learning only, right? Learning only should be your focus. So let's say now, if you're someone who's been trading for let's say call it a year, and they've been relatively inconsistent, they haven't been able to find much rhythm, right? And not necessarily even like the mentorship, but just in terms of like, because I think we can both say I would recommend a mentorship to somebody like that, right? Who's been trading for a year, they don't want to do that. We can both confidently say that. That's not the point of this interview. What would you say to them as like, what should they start to shift their focus on, right? Like, what do you think they should be putting focusing their learning on, or focusing their trading on, if they've been struggling here too, right? Regardless of their strategy and anything like that, they've been doing it for a year and they just can't seem to find any sort of consistency.
Okay, so the main thing that would kind of go back to where like a little bit ago when we talked is figure out what you're doing wrong.
Right.
If you're not consistent and you're not profitable, you're doing most likely multiple things wrong.
Yes.
And target those areas hard. Find someone who excels in that. Because usually everyone technically like excels in one category or another. Mm-hmm. So find someone that seems to do really well in that and ask questions.
Yeah.
Most people don't like asking questions, but that's the easiest way to learn.
Yeah. Crazy. And it's so crazy to me because like, at least I know this for you and I to be the case, because you asked a lot of questions. And when I first got it started, I asked a lot of questions. And I remember when I did the very first, I found this guy named Kansas. I don't know if you've ever met Kansas. We worked together in a couple of groups ago, the one right before I started the Rake Trades LLC. Him and I worked together. And when I was very first learning, he was this like, we couldn't be more opposite guys. I'm California, born and raised West Coast. He's born and raised in like Louisiana, lives in North Carolina, extremely Southern, right? He's like 50 years old, has kids. I'm a 20-year-old in college, two totally different things. But he loved talking to people about trading and loved talking about the markets. So I just started asking this dude everything. We would be up late night in the Discord chat till like 1 a.m. on a Friday night. And I'd just be like, well, why wouldn't you have bought this here? He goes, well, that's a lower high. I don't want to buy a lower high. I was like, oh, that meant all these little things. It's like the power of questions is so underutilized in this Discord trading world, because most of the time people love to help, right? And like, for me too, that's almost how I started networking, right? That's how I started started working with the Brett Simmons of the world, the Eric Marcuses of the world, the Andrew Diaz, the stock market wolves, all these different Instagram traders and people. I started to get connections, relationships with them the same way you and I now have a good relationship, right? Because you ask questions, you take the initiative to learn. It's like, those are the people we really want to work with. And those are also the people that like, they go places quickly, right? They move up the ladder quickly because you just take the time. It's like, learn, ask. Yeah, who cares if you annoy somebody a few times here and there, right? If you can start to sense that they're annoyed, take a day off from the questions, right? It's not that hard, right? Or ask other people in the chat, right? But the questions part, to me, it's just crazy to me that you said that, because I didn't know what your answer was going to be. Truthfully, there was a bunch of different ways you could have gone with that, but I couldn't agree more with is really find someone and ask, right? And ask, or find a group of people that have the same mindset, right? Whether it's our group or somebody else's group, find a group of traders that have a collective, the same mindset as you, and ask away, right? So you and I have this interview scheduled. The next interview I have scheduled is with Alli, one of the other members of our moderator and staff team. And Alli, if you think you asked a good amount of questions, you didn't. Alli asked every single thing under the sun. Alli would be the type of person that I would post a trade, and she would literally tag me 5 seconds afterwards and be like, what exactly are you looking at when you're buying this? And I'm like, oh, it's going to be a buy off of level here. And she would almost keep me in check, because like, there'd be times I'm like, oh, I think we're going to make a move up at this. And she's like, well, wouldn't you want to wait for this? From what you've told me, Jake, you should wait for this, this, and this. And I'm like, you're right, but shut up. Right. But no, man, it's just crazy. Sorry, again, me ranting a little bit, but the initiative to ask questions is so underutilized, I think, in the Discord space, because, especially at least with the environment we've created, you, I, the other staff members on the team, we love the questions. We love them, right? We love that people take the initiative to do that. There's plenty of us. We can answer these questions. We can go around. We can help that. And it just helps people learn. We network. We get to know people more. So if you're a year in, and if you've been inconsistent, you've been struggling, like Ron said, first, figure out what the hell you're doing wrong, right? Because if you don't do that, you're never going to take the next steps. And then the other is take the initiative to try and go out of your way to make it better, right? Go and ask questions, do a course, do a mentorship from the right people, right? Do something where you're in a room where you can talk and ask questions. Really, dive in head first, right? Dive in head first. No holding back, right? What about anything else you want to add on to that?
Yeah, well, I just have like 2 points just from what you kind of just said. And
yeah.
With the questions, don't mess with someone and say, hey, what's looking best for longs? What should I buy? What should I buy full port? If you put detail into questions, people can show you're passionate about it. You want to learn. The more detail you put in, the more they're willing to help you.
100%.
And like, no one wants to just constantly answer a DM like, hey, should I hold like this? And like, it might not even be a trade you're in, but like, I get why you'd ask, but a lot of times, if you want a fast response, you want a nice detailed response, and them to consistently be willing to help you, show you're passionate about it and put the effort into the questions.
100%. And most of the time, if you ask me, what are we doing about this? Or what are you watching and all that? I just don't respond, right? Because I just, not to be a dick. It's just, we have us, not me, but we have a lot of people in the group now that we're trying to help out and be attending for. Those aren't the questions that we want to spend our time typically answering, right? Because it takes away from the people who are answering the right questions, right? So like you said, phrasing, right? And I think that was always a strength of mine, is that like, I guess this is even a little bit weird to say, but find a way to ask people questions without necessarily asking them the question, right? Like if I post a trade and someone follows along with it and they want to know, why they want to know more about that trade, or if they want to know why you're holding, right? Or if you're holding or something like that, ask them why, right? Ask the in-depth questions that you can show, like Ron said, where you really show that you're putting in the work, right? You're putting in the passion to those questions, putting in the details. The good questions will get answered, right? And show that, hey, I'm taking the time that I want to learn this, and you'll be shocked at how much people are willing to tell you and just give you information if you ask the right way, right? If you ask politely, nicely, you say, hey, whenever you're free, right? I was just curious about this, right? The way you phrase things goes such a long way in this world, especially with like networking and questioning. So yeah, that was a good one. You said you had 2 points. That was the first one. You have one more?
Yeah. So the second one was when you started to mention Alli and like the amount of questions she like asked you and all this and that.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't really like regarding like that, but just it was more of something I noticed as I got a part of the team and got into staff chat.
Mm-hmm.
I started to realize like the amount of knowledge in that team blew me away.
Right.
I was like, oh, I feel like I know a decent amount. Got in there, started reading some of the comments. I'm like, I know nothing.
Yeah.
Like I'm not even I don't know anything.
Dude, so that's me. That's what I'm trying to figure out, a way where like we're definitely going to do the staff voice chats. We're definitely going to do that where we let other people, where we let the whole group listen in, and it's just us 6, 7 going back and forth. I think that's going to be great. But there's almost part of me that's like, we need to start to like highlight and save some of the like really cool stuff we talk about in the staff chat and share that and like get that other information out, like Joel's stuff that he's back testing right now. Like once he figures out all that more, like that kind of stuff, you got to figure out how to way that we can share that stuff with the world. Cause dude, that the staff chat, honestly, the main reason that I wanted to be in admin in some of the groups that I was previously in is because I wanted access to the staff chat. I know what goes on in the staff chat. The staff chat is where it's like 6 or 7 people who are all consistent, who also that's the group you want to surround yourself with, right? And so the goal for me is, can we get Rake Trades LLC to the point where the entire trading floor is like a staff chat, right? Where we have like a pro chat or something, where that's another idea that we've had before, but we've had the pro chat idea, right? Where pro chat would be similar to trading floor, but it's it's only certain people can talk in it, right? So it'd be all the staff members, some of the mentorship students who have progressed more, Peter, everybody like that. And have that sort of pro chat discussion. Whole lot of ideas flowing. I think that would be a good idea.
So kind of like being like how on Instagram and Twitter, like verified. Like once we see what you're doing,
right?
Then you get into this,
right?
And then you start getting into the real details.
So you're getting into the details that everybody can see. It's just limited people who can type there, right? And it's who can type there to keep that channel like clean. So whole lot of ideas for Rake Trades LLC and for the group, man. So I'm stoked. So with that, those were all the questions I had, and I think this was a great discussion. Is there anything else that you lingering comments, any burning things that you want to say before we wrap this up here?
I mean, not necessarily. I mean, I just appreciate all the like belief that you put behind me so far, and the fact that you brought me up onto the team out of 200 people. So that truly meant a lot.
Oh, you earned it, dude. You earned it. You really, really did earn it. You really did earn it. I mean that we're saying, believe me, because from day one, when we saw everything that you were posting, all that, the only thing I had to do is how can I convince the rest of the team, because they've been with me for a while. That was my only concern, because otherwise I would have taken you day one. And I was like, Ron knows his shit, right? I want him with me, not against me, right? So yeah, man. But any last thing that you can say, if somebody's out there struggling right now, somebody's out there, they've been inconsistent, they haven't been able to get over the hump, what would be sort of one piece of just, re-encouragement you might have for them?
So you have to remember, it's a process. One thing you guys always preach is, if you want like one of the highest paying or like most successful to get you financially stable jobs out there, what do you have to do? Every other job, you have to go through years and years and years of schooling with trial and error. And most people get into trading and think, hey, week one, I'm going to start making $10,000 a week.
Yep.
And people are setting unrealistic goals, which I also did myself in the beginning of the year. I set an absurd goal, and I'm like, wow, I'm not even close to that.
Right.
So you just kind of have to give yourself more of a reality check, which is something that I notice I do more with trading. where like people always hold themselves to insane expectations, where like if they get a stop loss hit or something like that, they'll go back and look at the end of the day and be like, oh, I just missed out on $20,000. But it's like, did you really? You would have trimmed here, here, here,
Right.
and there. So in reality, you might have made five.
Right.
Yeah, if you held everything for 1,000%, you'd make 20. But
Yeah.
no one's gonna do that.
No, no. Especially if as soon as you start watching that screen, no chance. No
Yeah.
chance. Yeah.
But the main thing I'd recommend for people that are like wanting to learn is ask questions and post charts.
Yep.
The one thing I've always done since I started doing technical analysis was I always posted charts. You may be horribly wrong, but then you can see why you're wrong, and others can give you advice and say, hey, I think this will happen, or I think that, instead of you just sitting there thinking that you're wrong or you're right.
100%. Figure out what's going wrong, figure out where it's happening, and what steps are you going to take to make it better? What are you going to do to change it, right? Or how are you going to change this kind of the rut that you've been in? How are you going to get out of it, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't agree more, bro. So with that, that's all I got. Let us get back to our Sundays now. Futures open up in a few minutes, so we'll see how those look. I'm expecting some blood, but who knows?
I have no clue at this point.
Right? That's the thing. It's either going to be continued blood, or we're going to get some sort of vicious short covering rally, because we have no SPY levels or SPS levels to the upside for like a while. Because the way we sold off, it's been brutal, right? So we don't even have any reaction levels to the upside. So we'll see, bro. We'll see. But dude, thank you so much again for taking the time to do this with me. I appreciate it. I only see literally the brightest and best things in your future, man, because I know how the work that you put into this in year one. I've said this to you before, but if I was where you were at year one, where I'd be at year four would be crazy, man. So keep at it, bro. I'm so stoked for you.
I appreciate it, brother. It means a lot.
My man. So make sure you're following me on Instagram and Ron on Instagram. I'll have our usernames in the link in our bio. If you have any other questions, do not feel to reach out to all of us. But with that, have a great night, everybody. And let's trade safe this week. Cheers, everybody. All right, Pierce, bro. I'll talk to you soon.
See ya. Have a good one.